On the evening of the 24th of July 2026, a wildfire driven by a record European heatwave reached the edge of a small Spanish town called Robledo de Chavela, about 65 kilometers west of Madrid. Spanish authorities had already ordered the evacuation of the entire municipality. The fire had been burning for days, driven by temperatures that had not been seen in Western Europe in recorded history. It was moving fast, and it was heading directly toward a cluster of white dishes, 6 massive antenna structures sitting in a natural bowl in the hills that, at that moment, were the only instruments on Earth capable of maintaining contact with the most distant human-made object in the history of our species. All 90 NASA personnel at the Madrid Deep Space Communications Complex evacuated safely. Then the fire passed through the facility. In the hours that followed, nobody on Earth knew what had happened to the antennas. NASA's statement was brief and measured. The wildfire had passed through the site, and damage would be assessed when it was safe to do so. Their real-time DSN tracking system, the one that shows minute by minute which antennas are communicating with which spacecraft, went dark for Madrid. All 6 dishes, silent. The good news, confirmed by an initial inspection on July 25, is that the antennas themselves appear to have survived. No significant structural damage to the dishes or the buildings. The fire burned the surrounding vegetation and the pavement and then moved on. But the story of what almost happened and of why this facility matters more right now than at almost any point in its 62-year history is not a story that ends with the antennas are fine. Because the Madrid complex did not almost lose 6 antennas. It almost lost something that cannot be rebuilt by any amount of construction or funding on any timeline that matters. Something that, once lost, is simply gone. Before we go further, this channel covers what is actually happening in space right now, with the real numbers and the real stakes. Subscribe, takes 1 second, you will want to be here for what is coming. To understand what was at risk, you need to understand what the Deep Space Network actually is and why it exists, because most people who have heard the name have never been told how it works or how close to the edge it currently operates. The story begins in January 1958. The Soviet Union had launched Sputnik the previous October, and the United States was racing to respond. JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, deployed portable radio tracking stations in Nigeria, Singapore, and California to receive signals from Explorer 1, the first successful American satellite. It worked. And immediately afterward, JPL's leadership recognized something that would define the next 7 decades of space exploration. Every spacecraft they would ever send beyond Earth would need to talk to the ground. Not occasionally, continuously. Commands going up, data coming down, position fixes, health checks, course correction. The spacecraft would be useless without the ground, and the ground would be blind without the spacecraft. A single tracking station would not be enough. As the Earth rotates, any fixed point on its surface loses line of sight with a spacecraft for significant portions of each day. To maintain continuous contact with a spacecraft anywhere in the solar system or beyond, you need at least 3 stations, spaced approximately 120 degrees apart in longitude, so that as one station rotates away, another rotates into view. Eberhard Rechten, head of JPL's Tracking and Data Acquisition Office, made that calculation. 3 sites, 120 degrees apart. Always one station in contact. Always one voice in the dark. The first site was Goldstone in the Mojave Desert of California. The second was near Canberra in Australia. The third was near Madrid in Spain. The network formally became the Deep Space Network in 1963. In the 62 years since, those 3 sites have supported every NASA mission beyond Earth orbit. Apollo, Viking, Voyager, Galileo, Cassini, Opportunity, Curiosity, Perseverance, James Webb. Every image, every telemetry packet, every command ever sent to a spacecraft exploring the solar system has passed through one of those 3 facilities. The Madrid complex has been at Robledo de Chavela since 1964. For 62 years, it has operated in a landscape that the designers of 1964 considered adequate. They selected the site for its radio-quiet environment hills to the west that blocked interference from commercial transmitters, remote enough from Madrid to avoid the noise of a growing city. They built it to last. And it has. What they did not plan for is what the hillsides around Robledo look like in 2026. June 2026 was the hottest June on record for Western Europe, more than 3 degrees Celsius above the baseline average. 3 consecutive heat waves drove months of drought across central Spain. The vegetation surrounding the complex which in 1964 was a manageable fire risk, is now classified by the European Forest Fire Information System as operating under structurally elevated danger. The infrastructure was sited in a threat environment that no longer exists. The Madrid complex is not simply one of three equivalent nodes in a network. It is, right now, the most important of the three. And understanding why requires understanding something about distance and physics that most coverage of the space program never explains. When Voyager 1 launched in September 1977, its radio transmitter operated at 23 watts, about the power of a moderately bright light bulb. By the time the signal from that transmitter reaches Earth today, after traveling more than 23.6 billion miles across interstellar space, it has spread across an area so vast that the power reaching any single receiver is approximately 1/10 of a billionth of a billionth of a watt. Read that number again. Not 1/10 of a watt. Not 1/10 of a millionth of a watt. 1/10 of a billionth of a watt. At that level of faintness, receiving the signal at all is an engineering achievement that requires every advantage available. The dishes must be as large as possible to collect as much of the spreading signal as they can. The receivers must be cooled to near absolute zero to reduce thermal noise. The signal processing must be extraordinarily precise. And increasingly, multiple antennas must work together, combining their signals in real time to collect enough photons to make the data readable. This technique is called arraying. And in April 2024, something happened at the Madrid complex that changed what arraying means for Voyager 1. For the first time in the history of the Deep Space Network, all 6 antennas at the Madrid complex were pointed at Voyager 1 simultaneously. 6 dishes, 170 meter and 534 meter, all linked, all receiving, all combining their signals into a single coherent stream. It was the largest array ever assembled from a single DSN site. And it was necessary because Voyager 1 is now so far away that receiving science data from one of its instruments, the plasma wave system requires 5 antennas working together as a minimum. As Voyager drifts further with every passing month, 6 will become the standard requirement, not a special event, not a demonstration. The baseline. Madrid is the only complex in the entire Deep Space Network that currently has 6 operational antennas. Goldstone has 4. Canberra has 4. Only Madrid has 6. And only Madrid's 6 antenna array can provide the receiving aperture that Voyager 1 signal now requires from that longitude. When the fire passed through Robledo de Chavela, it passed through the only place on Earth that can hear Voyager the way Voyager needs to be heard. But here is the thing about the Madrid wildfire that has not been reported clearly in any coverage so far. The fire did not arrive at a healthy, fully operational deep space network. It arrived at a network that was already in crisis. In September 2025, an accident at the Goldstone complex took the facility's primary 70 meter antenna, designated DSS-14, offline. The antenna over-rotated during a routine operation, stressing its internal cabling and piping. The failure of a hydraulic limit system, a safeguard that had not been properly tested since 2004, allowed the over-rotation to proceed unchecked, and the resulting flooding caused an estimated $4.1 to $4.6 million of damage. The investigation that followed found inadequate training, software weaknesses, bypass safety systems, and an over-reliance on undocumented procedures that existed only in the institutional memory of specific engineers. DSS-14, the 70 meter antenna at Goldstone, the most powerful single receiver in the Western Hemisphere, will not return to service until October 2028 at the earliest. 2 years offline for a machine that took decades to build and that the network cannot function without at full capacity. That was the situation before the Madrid fire. 1 of 3 70 meter antennas in the entire global network already offline. The other 2 at Madrid and Canberra, carrying the full communications load for every deep space mission NASA operates. Then, while Goldstone's primary antenna was still broken and its repair timeline stretched to 2028, NASA's own Inspector General published an audit of the Deep Space Network. The findings were stark. Demand for DSN time was already exceeding available supply by as much as 40% at peak periods. The upgrade program designed to address this shortfall was behind schedule and over budget. And the Inspector General projected that excess demand would reach 50% by the 2030s, even without further incidents. The network was already oversubscribed by 40%. Its most powerful Goldstone antenna was already down until 2028, and then a wildfire took the entire Madrid complex offline in a single evening. 3 simultaneous crises: an oversubscribed network, a broken primary antenna, and a forced evacuation of the only site with 6 antenna arraying capability. All converging in July 2026, the same month, NASA is preparing for the Roman Space Telescope launch, managing the Swift rescue mission, maintaining contact with 2 Voyager spacecraft, running the James Webb Science Program, operating the Mars rovers, and tracking every other active deep space mission in the agency's portfolio. The network had no slack. It still has none. There is a human dimension to this story that the engineering numbers alone do not capture. The Madrid Deep Space Communications Complex is not operated exclusively by Americans. It is a joint facility operated under a bilateral agreement between the United States and Spain, run day-to-day by INTA, Spain's National Institute of Aerospace Technology, on behalf of NASA. The 90 people who evacuated on July 24 were not NASA contractors from California who had flown in for a rotation. Most of them live in the surrounding communities. Some of them live in Robledo de Chavela itself, the town the fire also threatened. The wildfire that threatened the antennas threatened the homes of the people who operate those antennas. The 25,000 people evacuated from surrounding communities included the engineers, technicians, and support staff who have spent their careers maintaining the infrastructure that keeps humanity in contact with its spacecraft. For those 90 people, the evacuation was not an operational disruption. It was a personal emergency. They left. The antennas were unattended. And for several hours, the most demanding communications task in human history, maintaining a signal thread to a spacecraft more than 23 billion miles away, requiring 6 dishes coordinated to within microseconds, was being handled entirely by 2 other stations on the other side of the planet, covering the Madrid longitude as best they could from angles that were not designed for it. The signal held, the communications continued, the coverage gaps were managed. But the margin that was already thin before September 2025, already thinner after September 2025, already thinner again because of the existing demand over subscription, got thinner still. The practical question now, the one NASA has not yet answered publicly because the assessment is still ongoing, is how long Madrid will remain offline. The physical damage appears minimal. Pavement, vegetation, no antennas, no buildings. On the surface, that sounds like a rapid return to service. But returning a complex like MDSCC to operations after an unplanned full evacuation is not simply a matter of unlocking the gate and switching the systems back on. Every antenna must be inspected, not just visually, but technically. Electrical systems checked, cooling systems verified, software states confirmed, calibration runs completed, the precise alignment of a 70-meter dish, which must point to within fractions of a degree to track a specific spacecraft at a specific distance, must be verified before it goes back into the communications schedule. None of that is fast. And while it is happening, every mission that would normally use Madrid must either wait or be rerouted to Goldstone or Canberra, 2 stations that were already running at the limit of their capacity before July 24. For most active missions, the workaround is manageable. Mars rovers can tolerate gaps in their communication windows. The James Webb Space Telescope has a large buffer memory and can accumulate data until a contact is available. Orbital missions near Earth are barely affected. Voyager 1 is different. Voyager 1 requires 6 antennas from the Madrid longitude to receive science data. Without Madrid, that receiving capability does not exist. Goldstone and Canberra can maintain the basic signal. The link stays alive, commands can be sent, basic telemetry can be received on their 4 antenna arrays. But the science data rate that requires the full Madrid 6 antenna array cannot be replicated from anywhere else until the complex returns to service. Every day Madrid is offline is a day of science. Data from Voyager, one that is received at reduced quality or not at all. From a spacecraft operating on 4 watts of power, 23 billion miles away, approaching the November 2026 milestone of being 1 full light day from Earth, the first time any human-made object will ever have reached that distance. Here is what this story is actually about. The Deep Space Network was designed in 1958 to be a permanent feature of human civilization's relationship with space. 3 sites, 120 degrees apart, always in contact. For 67 years, that design has held. The The network has tracked Pioneer, Voyager, Galileo, Cassini, the Mars landers, and every deep space mission NASA has ever flown. It received the first signals from Voyager as it crossed the heliopause into interstellar space. It transmitted the commands that kept Voyager alive when its memory chips began to fail. It is, in a very specific sense, the voice that connects everything we have ever sent into the deep dark with the planet that sent it. That voice has 3 nodes. Right now, one of those nodes has a broken primary antenna that will not be repaired until 2028. A second node just had a wildfire pass through it and is partially offline for an unknown duration. The third node, Canberra, is currently carrying the communications load that was designed to be shared across 3 facilities. The system held. The antennas at Madrid survived. The network did not fail. But the story of the Madrid wildfire is not a fire was contained. The story is that a 6-7-year-old network built for the threat environment of 1958, designed for the communications demands of the 1960s, and now asked to maintain contact with more active spacecraft than at any point in its history on a budget that its own Inspector General says is insufficient, with an upgrade program that is behind schedule, and with its most powerful California antenna broken until 2028, came within the width of a firebreak of losing its only 6 antenna site. And Voyager 1 would have kept transmitting 22 watts, spreading across billions of miles of space. Arriving at Earth is a fraction of a billionth of a watt, looking for 6 antennas in a Spanish hillside that were no longer there to listen. That is what the Madrid wildfire almost was. The antennas are physically intact. They survived the fire. And the question of whether they will be properly resourced, properly protected, and properly maintained for the next 62 years, that question is still open. Next on this channel, scientists just confirmed the first atmosphere on a rocky planet in the habitable zone of another star, 48 light-years away, surviving 3 billion years of bombardment from a violent red dwarf. The paper is published, the data is real. And the question it forces into the open is one that astronomy has been circling for 20 years. Subscribe. That video is next.